Today we're going to continue looking at some rare stems and some we're wrapping up the grammar, and so we're looking at some further things that you should know. First, we're going to look at geminate verbs. Now, what are geminate verbs? Geminate verbs, they come from the word Gemini, which means twins, and these are words or verbal roots that have a doubled consonant as the second and third root letters. Okay, so go ahead and look at that. We're on page 210. Some examples. Halal, you see the lamed lamed, second and third place. Savav, two baits. Arar, two reishes. Tamam, two mems. One is a final mem, so it looks a little different. Some forms are regular. For instance, we've already seen in the D stem and the PL that halal is pretty straightforward. But other words and other forms and other conjugations are somewhat irregular, so we have to point them out. This is funny. In fact, he says, the forms are inconsistently irregular, which makes learning specific paradigms less helpful. So he says certain patterns can be recognized, but a good rule of thumb is that if a verb analysis does not yield a probable root, the root is likely geminate. And we'll explain what that means in a little bit. So, what happens basically is that a lot of times that the third root letter, it drops out. So we're used to this happening with nuns and yods and hays, but not with baits, not with reishes, and so that's where it's confusing. So what he's saying is, if you are trying so hard as you might, and you still can't figure out what the root is, it's probably a geminate verb. There's probably a doubled root letter that needs to be added back. Okay? So, all right. When you lose that last root letter, a lot of times you will have a doubling, a dagesh forte, in the middle root letter. Okay, peek over to page 211. We see savav. Savav means to encircle, to surround. Savav. Savava. That's pretty straightforward. But wait, sabota. Sabota. That does not look like anything that we've seen before. And so he mentions, okay, the bait has a dagesh in it. And then if you peek back to the other side of the page, on 210, at the very bottom, a helping holum links the doubled letter to the affirmative. Okay? So that also tells us that something weird is happening. So the dagesh and the helping holum give us a hint that there is a doubled root letter that has dropped out. Peek back over on 211. We were on sabota, and now we're sabot, saboti, and then over savava, savavu, that's normal, and then weird again, sabotem, sabotain, sabonu, okay? So that's what can happen sometimes. Or, if you have a guttural letter, if there's a repetition of a guttural letter, like a reish, it won't double, but will usually show compensative lengthening. So you can't double a reish, but it will kick back and make the preceding vowel longer. So arar is to curse, arar, arara, and then arota. Okay, arota. So the holum vav, it tells us that it hints at the fact that there's an extra resh that's supposed to be there. Arota, arot, aroti, and then over araru, arotem, aroten, aronu. And C, some geminates show only 2 of the 3 root letters in this third singular masculine form. So we would expect tamam, we have tam. What's tamam? To make unclean or something like that. So tam, and then tama, we have a doubling there. Tamama, tamota, tamot, tamoti, tamu, tamotem, tamoten, tamonu. All that to say, again, use what he said before as a reference that if try as you may, you can't figure out what the root letter is, chances are that it's a geminate verb. Okay? The call imperfect is also unpredictable. Great. Yeah, example 1, yisov. That's a first noon, or that's a geminate verb. Savav, the imperfect of savav, to surround, but it follows the first noon pattern, and so that means that the samek has a doubling in it. Okay. Flip over to page 212. Yasov. This is the imperfect of savav, but this one is similar to a hollow verb. So it has the o, savo, yasov, okay? The previous one was savav too, so that just shows you how inconsistent this can be. And then example 3, yetam. What is that? It's the imperfect of tamam. But the pattern here is similar to the first yod, so that means where we'd expect yitam, there's a tzere instead of a hirik, so yetam. We don't need to worry about imperatives or infinitives, and participles, though, are often regular. Sovev, it keeps the doubling. So sovev, sovevet, sovevim, and sovevot. Okay? Nifals, you don't need to worry about. Hifils, let's talk about hifils briefly. The perfect form shows the he prefix with an e vowel, okay? So where we would expect an e vowel, it's an a vowel, like an e vowel. The double root letter is marked by a Dagesh forte, okay? So the root, so that the second of the 2, the second of the 1, the first of the 2, that's what I mean, has a doubling in it, okay? So, hesev, heseba, hasibota, hasibot, hasiboti, hasebu, hasibotem, hasiboten, hasibonu. The imperfect of the hifil with geminate verbs show the preformative with an a vowel, so that's normal for the hifil. Okay, you normally have a patach. So yasev, that's a kametz, but it's still an a vowel. Okay, so yasev, that's a geminate verb from savav. Okay, so that's he will surround, and so on. Tasev, tasebi. Okay, it's a little tricky, a little weird. The imperative restores the he prefix, okay, with the a vowel, which I think is normal with the hifil, so hasev. But remember, you're losing that last letter because it's a geminate verb. So it's savav, it's not hasav or yasav or nasav or sava. It's savav. 2 baits on the end. And so on. And the participle also has the meme, which is normal. Okay? All right. So again, remember, if try as you may, you cannot figure out what the root is, chances are it's a geminate verb. And you have to restore the extra consonant at the end for recording the root. Okay. moving on. Page 213. Paragraph 2, polel, polal, and hitpolel conjugations. All right, this is super interesting and kind of cumbersome. Verbs that don't have a sound middle root letter, what would those be? Well, those would be hollow verbs. They don't have a sound middle root letter, like katal. You can double that tate from katal, but you cannot double the middle root of bo or shuv. You can't. So instead of that, hollow verbs have an alternate way of expressing kind of the PL meaning, and that's with polel, polal, and hitpolel. Okay. So instead of doubling the middle root letter, which does not work, you end up doubling the final letter, but not with a dagesh. You actually add another letter. So that's why they're combining this with the geminate verbs, because you could get these confused. In the geminate verbs, you often lose the last letter, but in the polel, polal, and hitpolel, you often add an extra letter. So, for instance, take a look. The polel, which is the PL of a hollow verb, kum, becomes komeim. He raised, and that's that intensive meaning of the PL. Okay, so komeim, komema, komamta, komamt, komamti, komamu, komamtem, komamtem, komamnu. So it's that doubling of the mem that's a little strange, but you got to recognize that's a polel, and you can hear it too, polel. It's still from the root pa'al, which is what all the other conjugations except for PL are based on. So pa'al only has one lamed, but polel has two lameds. Okay. The imperfect shows the preformative with a shavat, like the PL and pual. So yeah, that's normal. Yekomeim, that's kum. It's the polel of kum, yekomeim, and so on. The passive is polal. So like the pual, you're in an O class vowel, which are O and U. Instead of pual, you have polal. So you have an O class vowel, and then you have the doubling. You have the extra letter. So kum in polal is komam, and it means he was raised. It's a passive meaning. So in the perfect, komam, komama, komamta, and so on. Okay. We'll keep moving. Flip over to page 215, or look over to page 215. Hitpolel. You have to have a hit conjugation, even though you can't double anything. So remember, hitpael is related to the PL, and so here we need another one. So that's the hitpolel. So it's built off the polel, which is similar to the PL in meaning, and it adds the hit in hit beginning. Okay, so kum becomes hitkomeim. So remember the hit prefix plus the extra repetition of the letter at the end. Hitkomeim. And then imperfect is yitkomeim. All right. Okay, so remember the defining markers here are, they're similar to the PL, but they have that extra letter that they add because it's a hollow verb and you can't double a root letter that doesn't exist. So, okay, final thing is verbal hendiadys. This is a really, really cool way that Hebrew can nuance its meaning. Often two verb forms are used to express one verbal idea. Certain verbs function as auxiliary verbs and are best translated as adverbs. So what they're saying is there might be a case where you see two verbs that are working together to communicate one idea or one verbal meaning. So for example, for shuv, to return. When this is used in conjunction with another verb, it means to do something again. So, vayashuvu vayivku. Literally, this means they returned and cried, but that doesn't really make sense. So, how we would translate it is they cried again. They did something again. They cried again. They returned and cried. They cried again. Example 5, rava means to increase in the hifil. When used in hendiadys, it's to do something in a large amount. So the example, vayarbu vayivku. Literally, they increased and cried. That doesn't make sense. They cried greatly. Yasaf. Excuse me. This is probably one of the more common ones that you'll see in a verbal hendiadys. In the kal, it means to add. In the hifil, it means to increase. And so in verbal hendiadys, it becomes to do something again or to continue. So, vayosifu vayivku. Literally, they increased and cried. Or, more smoothly, they cried again, or they continued crying. Usually it's used in that again sense. They did something again. So you can underline that. And then the final one, halak. What does that mean? It means to walk. Well, in a hendiadys, it means to continue on. This is actually, this example is really cool because you actually see this. This is one that's lifted right from the Bible. Hayam holek veso'er. Literally, the sea was walking and storming. Well, the sea can't really walk, but it can keep on storming. Hayam holek veso'er. The sea was walking and storming, but translated more smoothly, the sea kept on storming. And that's verbal hendiadys. Let's do vocab. Kisei, throne or seat. Machane is camp, usually a military camp, not like a fun camp. Afar, dust or earth. Etzem is bone, and this is the word that's used in man's exclamation over his wife when he first sees her in Genesis 2. Bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Shemesh, sun. We'll do the other ones. Az means then. Arba means four. We'll get into numbers in a sec in next lesson. Ka'asher. This is interesting. This is really a combination of preposition kof, preposition kof, with asher, but together it's not translated as when, but it's translated, no, it is translated as or when. So as, according to is maybe also a great way to translate this, according to or when. Saviv means around, and shalosh means 3. And some verbs. Arar, to curse. There's your geminate verb, 2 reishes. Baka, to cry or weep. Halal, in the peel, means to defile. And in the hifil, it often means to begin. And it's often used with an infinitive. So, vayachel livkot, and he began to cry. Not, and he defiled to cry. So there's an example of 2 verbal roots having different meanings. Now don't confuse this with halal, which means to praise. That has a hey. This has a hate. So halal, to defile in the peel and to begin in the hifil. Chana, to camp. And that's where we get our noun machane, an encampment, a camp. Chashav is to think, account, regard, or consider. Yasaf is to add, increase, or in a verbal hendiadys, it can mean to do something again. Savav is a geminate verb. Two baits is to go around or surround. Ra'ah in the kal means to be evil, and in the hifil it means to do evil or to act badly. That's another geminate verb. Two ayans. And last one, tamam. In the kal it means to be complete, to be finished. So that's what the mean is, not to defile something, not to make something unclean. Tamam means to be complete, finished, or in the hifil it means to complete, or to cause something to be complete. All right, great job.